I haven't told this story to very many people, but I guess this seems as good a time as any. Quite a few years ago, before our family was attending this congregation, I had what I think was an unusual experience. At least it's the only time something like this has happened to me. It was during a time that some things I was dealing with were particularly challenging, and I was beginning to question some very essential things, even the existence of God. I had just left a church meeting and was driving home, music surrounding me in the car. Out of nowhere, I had the tangible sensation of being hugged, a warm pressure around my body. It didn't last long. There was no change to the physical environment of the car, and I assure you there was no other human with me. Maybe it was some sort of combination of the music and the weather and my emotions and the seatbelt. I could probably analyze it endlessly. But it felt like a sacred embrace. And at that point, it was exactly what I needed. There have been times since then that my memory of that event has been the thing that has maintained my confidence in the reality of the mystery of God's Spirit. There was no message, no language, no words, no confirmation about a particular decision I was in the midst of discerning, no arrow or finger pointing to the direction to turn, no miraculous solution to the challenges that I was facing. But I had a sense in that brief moment that I was part of something larger than myself, something I didn't really understand. I was comforted by something beyond me, incomprehensible and overwhelming, and also deeply personal. I was in awe. I've had other moments where I've experienced what I would call awe, although the experiences often seem too few and fleeting and far between. Maybe you can think of a time that you have experienced awe, a time you have felt like you were in the presence of something vast that transcended your understanding of the world. At least that's how Dr. Keltner would define awe. Dr. Keltner is a psychologist at the University of California, Berkeley, and he was recently on Krista Tippett's On Being podcast at the beginning of February. He has studied emotions for years, including the specifics of how facial expressions indicate certain emotions. And he's become particularly well known for his work on the emotion of happiness. He was actually consulted for the Pixar film Inside Out, where emotions come to life in the mind of 11-year-old Riley after she moves with her family across the United States, and she navigates the life changes that came along with that move. More recently, Keltner's research has taken a turn towards exploring awe, which was sort of left out over the past several decades as various emotions have been taken up by researchers. Perhaps because it is difficult to define, difficult to pin down. Perhaps because awe is difficult to study, given its very essence. It's less an individual's experience that serves some kind of self-preservation purpose, as many emotions tend to do, fear, anger, joy. But awe is more connected to something outside of the self. Much of what Keltner and Krista Tippett discussed on the recent podcast was rooted in Keltner's newly published book called Awe, the New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. Part of what drew me to this work was simply the content, because I was settling on this Matthew 17 text at about the same time that I heard the podcast. And so I was interested in his exploration of the idea of awe. That's the part of this text that has really drawn me in. But also part of what attracted me to Keltner's work was this language of everyday wonder, every day, as if awe might be something that we can experience as a part of regular life and have access to it anytime. That's not how it seemed to me when I first looked at Matthew 17. The disciples that joined Jesus on the mountain seem to have been specifically selected and invited, Peter, James, and John, and they were heading for the top. This involved some work. At least the times I have hiked to the top of a hill or mountain have been pretty intentional. But suddenly they've reached the top, no description of the ascent, and fairly instantly, it seems, Jesus was transfigured. The Common English Bible uses the word transformed, glowing, radiating. The Greek word here in verse 2 for what happened to Jesus is what has become our English word metamorphosis. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as light. This is often the part of the story that we know, or at least this is what is referred to as the Transfiguration. But it's not the end of this story, and I think some of the best stuff is still coming. Moses and Elijah appear, and this is significant to Matthew because of the emphasis Matthew places throughout his gospel on connections to the Jewish history and the Hebrew scriptures. Connecting Jesus with Moses and Elijah here is significant. But what I find particularly interesting is Peter is sort of like, okay, so here's what I think we should do. Let's build you some shelters. Now, I realize we don't have a description of how Peter said what he said. Was it, whew, good thing we're here? Or was it, wow, I'm thrilled that we're here? Or was it something else? But it becomes really clear in the next phase of the story the emotion that Peter and John and James are feeling. A bright cloud appears. A voice emanates from the cloud to confirm Jesus' divinity, and the disciples fall on their faces, filled with awe. No question about their emotional response here. They were filled with awe. Some versions of the text say fear, but I appreciate this language of awe. This helps remind us we're not talking about a frozen-in-place, scary mask kind of fear, more of a humbling, a sense of being overcome by the experience that is happening. That must have been a very powerful, bright cloud. Right before Christmas, our family traveled to California, and during our brief time in Laverne visiting family, we stayed at an Airbnb rental, which usually is what makes sense for a family of 6. It was a cute little 3-bedroom ranch-style home in North Pomona with a fenced-in backyard and lemon and orange trees dripping with fresh fruit. I stepped out into the yard one evening as the sky was starting to dim, which is my favorite time of day. That transition from daytime to evening, dusk, even the word dusk feels sort of magical. The temperature drops, the sunlight fades, and the silhouettes of objects give them a new appearance. And often something pretty lovely is happening in the sky, too. And I noticed that there was a beautiful glow. Do you want to? It's okay. I'm gonna try it. I don't want to get ahead of my slides, so. Okay, good. Sorry. I noticed that there was a beautiful glow kind of off in the horizon. And within 10 minutes, it looked like this. Beautiful, bright clouds. Awe. For some of us, we feel like we can safely travel through Lent without encountering anything that really challenges our understanding until we get to the resurrection. Many of us find theological grounding in Jesus' life and teachings, and the earthiness of Lent is significant. Ashes to ashes, the reality of the humanness of confession and attempts to repent and change. The bursting of branches and bulbs into stems and buds from the cool, damp soil we can touch and smell and feel those changes, and there is indeed a mystery there. But then we come to this story in Matthew 17. We are told the story of this sudden and surprising event, Jesus doing things or things happening to Jesus that are not normal, not expected, not natural. Given the nature of the Gospels, books that are written to paint a theological picture as opposed to historical accuracy, perhaps the historicity of this event is not so much the point. And if we focus on that, we might miss it. I would like to suggest that the point of this story is that Jesus transforms and will continue to be transforming as the disciples live through what is to us a now familiar story. But Jesus isn't the only one who transforms. Those earliest listeners to Matthew's story would have known and remembered that Moses was transformed by God. In Exodus 34, his face shone. They would have known and remembered that Elijah was transformed by God in 1 Kings 19, exposed to the thin, quiet sound of God's presence after wind and earthquake and fire. And the earliest listeners are now hearing and knowing that Jesus was transformed by God. And, filled with awe, the disciples are also transformed by God, voice booming from the bright cloud. So, too, we can be transformed by God. The transformation can happen in us when we notice, pay attention to the bright cloud, when we are willing to pause and willing to listen to what and whom is calling from the bright cloud. It is in the touch of Jesus that the moment of awe is connected to God. Otherwise, it's just a neat thing, a tingly moment, a surprising or overwhelming or incomprehensible feat of skill or superhumanity. But after they were awestruck, Jesus came and, in Matthew's version, touched them. Get up. Don't be afraid. Let's head back, Jesus might have said, back down the mountain where the air is thick and the bright cloud isn't going to be visible. But remember it. Catch a glimpse of it now and then, and remember what this moment was like when you encountered God. Jesus glowing builds into the bright cloud, the voice of God, and it pushes the disciples beyond what they can really handle, to be quite honest. Face down in awe and fear, it's overwhelming. They don't even really seem to know what to do with themselves. And then suddenly, a touch, a word, and the humanity of Jesus brings things back, puts their feet back on the ground, allows them to reassume their own humanity in the process. Matthew has already told us that Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us, and Jesus' touch confirms it, connecting the bright cloud of the presence of the holy to the hand of Jesus. And much like my own experiences with awe, the moment is fleeting. Soon, the regular routine disciples are back to trying to figure things out. But in the midst of this routine of daily life, they had experienced awe. They were open to the invitation, saw the bright cloud and heard the voice, and were filled with awe. For centuries, religious and spiritual people have been trying to capture this sense of awe with soaring ceilings in ornate cathedrals, through multiple choir voices and orchestras, rituals and prayers, trying to recreate it. But maybe we don't need to try so hard. Maybe we need to be open and attentive, noticing what is happening around us. Part of what has attracted me to Keltner's work is his approach. He has asked people to tell their stories, talk about their own experiences with the phenomenon of awe. And he put those stories into categories, and his research has yielded what he calls 8 wonders of life, 8 categories that describe the context of the majority of experiences of awe. And I wonder which of these resonate with your own awe experiences. The first he calls moral beauty, observing the kindness, goodness, courage, strength, willpower of others. It was almost exactly 11 months ago, last April, that this congregation's own Haley Weil, now 8 years old, felt a painful lump in her leg. That lump led to a cancer diagnosis, chemotherapy, and in July, she had a unique surgery called rotationplasty, an amputation of her leg, and an incredible shift of her ankle to become her knee. In October, she walked for the first time on her prosthetic. And as of a little more than a week ago, she has been completely cleared with no physical restrictions and limitations. So they went rock climbing. Haley's mom, Jackie, said they wouldn't be able to be here this morning, but I suspect they might be listening in at some point. Haley, Sister Quinn, Jackie, and Kevin, we are in awe of you. The next category of awe on Dr. Keltner's list he calls collective effervescence, the awesome energy that emerges when things are experienced together as a group at a concert or a sporting event or singing a hymn together, or when a crowd of strangers shares a unique moment and feel like they are one. When people are moving together, embodying that oneness in dance or doing the wave at a baseball game. Awe is found in nature and wild things. The intricate detail of a spider web, the awe-inducing grandeur of a forest or an ocean. Cresting a hill on a country road during a morning commute and noticing an incredible view of farmland and a beautiful sunrise. The detail of the tiniest branches highlighted in white by a fresh snowfall, which I don't think we will see the remainder of this season. The glow and sparkle of city lights on a rainy night. A flock of birds swooping and shifting in the sky, eventually resting like leaves on barren branches in an empty tree. Music and sound, vocal and instrumental music, bells and piano and organ and marimba and guitar, chanting and spoken word poetry, a full orchestra wrapping around each listener, a soloist creating a shared focal point for many. Awe can be found in visual representations, creative architecture of a soaring skyscraper, or a close-up photograph of a honeycomb. Visual art with its variety of shape and form and texture and space and color. Awe can be found in spiritual and religious experiences, the mystical, the metaphorical, spiritual systems that speak to the soul, the presence of the sacred visible in our world, the light that shines through the darkness. We feel awe in the presence of the intersections of life and death, where being human begins and ends, the sacred ground that many of us have experienced as we have joined with God's creation in birth and witnessed the shift from this life to the unknown next. And finally, awe can be found in epiphanies, sudden and astounding understandings of essential truth, expansion of knowledge, something that shifts life as we knew it and provides clarity and more questions. Do you notice what's not on this list? Experiences with our smartphones, social media, the new purse or expensive sneakers that we bought, the status we hold in a social or professional group. But here's another thing I noticed. The story of Jesus' transformation and the bright cloud has all of these. We are unlikely to find ourselves on a mountaintop with a glowing Jesus and God's voice emanating from a bright, sacred cloud. All of these wonders of life simultaneously present. But we are able to experience and seek awe. These wonders are available to us in our daily life. In Keltner's research, he noticed that people experienced awe about 2 to 3 times a week when they were intentionally recording it in a diary. What does awe do? It increases the sense of being part of a community, larger than self, interdependence. It increases our humility. It decreases our anxiety. It increases wonder, curiosity, openness, and the ability to embrace mystery. Encourages sacrificial behavior. Keltner doesn't go this far, but I will. I would posit that these are essential ingredients of a spiritual life. Awe allows us to see something in a way we have never seen it before. Here in Matthew 17, we notice the disciples engaged with a shared experience of seeing the depth and mystery and ineffable quality of Jesus. That's why we are here. Yes, we're here for the community and the friendships and family relationships, the comfort of ritual and tradition, the emphasis on social justice. But the absolute essence of all of that is the continued revelation of the mystery of the divinity of God in Jesus. And it's here in Matthew 17. It's amazing how ordinary awe can be. It's all around us. And if you seek it out, I think you will find that these things take us outside ourselves, seem unfathomable, beyond understanding. We notice the delicate, the beautiful, and the strong. And so I wish for you, for us, the awe and wonder fused with God's love found in the human touch of Jesus. Let us seek together the everyday awe that is right here, right now, and allow ourselves to be transformed more and more into the likeness of Christ, radiating and bright. Amen.